The storm had been brewing for days, but no one expected the cyclone to become so violent that it carried the ocean itself onto land. As fierce winds tore through the coastline, massive waves pushed forward with unstoppable force, flooding streets and fields with salt water and debris. Amid the chaos, something terrifying and completely unexpected appeared: sharks, swept from the ocean, now gliding through flooded neighborhoods. Residents watched in disbelief as sleek bodies of predators moved silently among cars and houses, turning familiar streets into dangerous waterways. People scrambled to safety, trying to avoid the deadly teeth and tails that now dominated their towns. Like and subscribe to stay connected to more unbelievable stories where nature breaks all boundaries and surprises us. Authorities struggled to warn citizens while rescue teams coordinated efforts to guide both humans and sharks to safety. The surreal event turned the town into a scene from a disaster movie, blending fear, awe, and the raw power of the ocean. Scientists later explained that rising water levels, high tides, and the force of the cyclone had forced marine life inland unexpectedly. That day would be remembered as the moment when the ocean literally invaded human territory, leaving a permanent mark on history. 1. The arrival of the cyclone. The cyclone approached the coast with a roar louder than thunder, shaking the trees violently. Winds ripped through homes, uprooting trees and sending debris flying like deadly missiles across roads. Heavy rain lashed the village, turning streets into rivers that swept away anything in their path. Villagers ran desperately to higher ground, watching the ocean churn with unrelenting fury. Dark clouds twisted in strange patterns, reflecting the terror that awaited inland beyond the shore. The sky was a tumultuous canvas, filled with violent winds and the screams of the frightened towns. Animals fled in chaos as the cyclone moved inland, carrying water and destruction in its path. Roofs flew off buildings, walls collapsed, and the earth seemed to tremble beneath the storm's wrath. The ocean itself rose in anger, surging inland with waves taller than the tallest palm trees. People clutched each other as the cyclone carried not only water but the unknown menace of nature. Floodwaters spread rapidly, turning farmland into lakes where fish and debris floated aimlessly. The storm's noise was deafening, a combination of wind, water, and crashing structures that terrified all. Lightning illuminated the dark chaos, revealing objects from the sea being hurled toward the land. The cyclone seemed endless, devouring everything in its path without mercy or pause for breath. Children were carried screaming, and elders prayed for protection as the waters consumed the streets. Even hardened fishermen watched in disbelief as the storm showed power beyond any human understanding. 2. Sharks in the flood. As the floodwaters surged, strange shapes began appearing, moving through the submerged streets slowly. Villagers gasped in horror when they realized the water carried sharks far inland, far from the sea. The creatures, carried by the storm, swam through flooded roads, overturning debris with powerful tails. People screamed and ran, trying to escape both the water and the predatory fish it carried. The sharks, confused and frantic, collided with cars, street signs, and fallen trees in chaos. Children watched in terror as the beasts swam past their homes, teeth glinting under the rain-soaked skies. Animals huddled on rooftops, sensing the unnatural presence of predators in the floodwaters. The waters rose higher, carrying not only sharks but jellyfish, debris, and pieces of broken docks. Fishermen who once knew the sea were stunned to see their dangerous companions brought to their streets. People realized the storm had created a deadly corridor, where ocean predators roamed inland freely. The sight of sharks thrashing near homes sent panic through everyone trapped in the flooded town. Residents tried to find shelter on rooftops, praying the waters and their predators would not reach them. Even helicopters sent to rescue citizens had difficulty maneuvering through the debris-laden waters. The sharks swam with strength, tossed by currents yet still dangerous, turning familiar streets into hunting grounds. Every eye watched in disbelief as the ocean's predators became an unthinkable inland threat. The villagers' fear multiplied, knowing that escaping the flood was no longer enough to ensure safety. 3. The coastal exodus. Villagers near the coast abandoned their homes as the cyclone approached with unprecedented ferocity. Families carried belongings while wading through rising waters, praying for safety and survival. Roads were blocked by fallen trees and debris, forcing people to take dangerous, unfamiliar paths. Some tried to move livestock, but the animals panicked, adding to the chaos and destruction. Children clutched their parents tightly, terrified of both the storm and the predators within its waters. The wind howled like a living creature, tearing off roofs and tossing furniture into the flooded streets. People climbed onto makeshift rafts and debris, hoping to avoid both the water and swimming sharks. The cyclone's approach was rapid, leaving little time for preparation and causing widespread panic. Electric poles fell, cutting off communication and leaving the town isolated from the outside world. The rising tide carried boats, fish, and countless items from the harbor into the village roads. Villagers had no choice but to flee, witnessing the terrifying combination of wind, water, and predators. Every step inland was dangerous, with currents strong enough to sweep away even the strongest adults. The coastline that had once provided life and livelihood became a perilous path of destruction. Storm surge pushed the water far beyond normal limits, flooding homes, markets, and fields. Rescue operations struggled against the overwhelming force of both the wind and ocean predators. 4. The inland rampage. As the cyclone moved inland, water levels rose, carrying sharks into streets and marketplaces. The floodwaters demolished barriers, sweeping away vehicles and submerging familiar landmarks completely. Sharks moved with terrifying agility, attacking debris and occasionally startled animals in the flood. Villagers scrambled onto rooftops, watching as the water became a dangerous, predator-filled river. Electric wires snapped, sending sparks across the water and adding to the already perilous environment. Even the strongest adults feared crossing the floodwaters, knowing a shark could be lurking nearby. Children and the elderly were moved to higher ground, but space was limited and fear was overwhelming. Markets, homes, and schools were under several feet of water, turning life into a living nightmare. Sharks thrashed against barriers, their size and power leaving permanent dents in walls and fences. Every attempt to rescue trapped citizens required precision, courage, and a constant eye on the predators. The inland areas were never prepared for such an event, leaving communities vulnerable and terrified. The water carried not only predators but disease, pollution, and debris, compounding the disaster. Floodwaters split the town into islands, forcing people to make impossible decisions to survive. Rescue teams navigated by boat, constantly vigilant against the unpredictable movements of sharks. The inland rampage left a trail of destruction, uprooting lives, infrastructure, and peace of mind. Communities huddled together, finding strength in unity while watching their surroundings destroyed. 5. The rooftop refuge. Villagers climbed onto rooftops as waters rose, seeking safety from the sharks swimming below fiercely. Children clung to parents, eyes wide with fear, as debris floated past like miniature ships in chaos. The rooftops became temporary islands, holding families above water that carried predators unchecked. The wind whipped violently, threatening to lift fragile roofs into the sky, adding terror to the night. Elderly residents trembled in fear, their prayers blending with the roar of the cyclone above. Dogs and cats huddled with their owners, sensing the unnatural danger creeping through the flood. Every roof creaked under weight and panic, testing the courage of those stranded above the storm. Neighbors called to each other across flooded streets, sharing hope and fear in equal measure. The water glistened in lightning flashes, revealing sharks circling like shadows of death beneath them. Parents held children tightly, whispering assurances while knowing the predators below were real. Even the strongest rooftops shook, reminding everyone that the cyclone could destroy their fragile haven. The air was thick with rain, salt, and fear, pressing on lungs and hearts alike with relentless force. Helicopters tried to navigate the winds, searching for stranded survivors on treacherous roofs. The cyclone refused to relent, carrying more debris, more water, and more predators into the town. The rooftops became lifelines, small islands of human determination in a sea of chaos and terror. 6. The lost livestock. Animals trapped in floodwaters struggled against currents, some dragged into waters by panic or predators. Cows, goats, and chickens were swept away, adding to the devastation and heartbreak of villagers. Farmers cried as years of work and sustenance disappeared beneath the storm's unrelenting force. The sharks, confused by the new environment, occasionally attacked stranded animals in the flood. Pigs squealed in terror, struggling against debris while their pens collapsed into surging waters. Even pets were not safe, as cats and dogs swam desperately or hid atop floating furniture. Villagers tried to rescue livestock with ropes and rafts, risking lives in waters teeming with predators. Every step in the water carried risk, with unseen dangers lurking below and debris above. Floodwaters carried the animals far from their pastures, leaving families uncertain of their fate. The loss of livestock threatened both food supply and livelihoods, creating despair alongside fear. Children cried for missing animals, remembering the care given over months or years. The cyclone proved merciless, attacking both humans and animals indiscriminately in its path. Even rescue efforts were hindered, as navigating debris-filled waters with sharks below was perilous. Farmers' dreams of harvest were destroyed, replaced by survival and the haunting memory of loss. Every floating carcass or missing animal became a symbol of nature's uncontrolled power. Villagers realized that survival meant leaving behind everything familiar, including their animals. 7. The emergency response rescue teams arrived with boats and helicopters, facing a nightmare of water, debris, and sharks. Every attempt at saving lives was met with unpredictable dangers, testing skill and courage. Volunteers worked tirelessly, pulling families from rooftops while avoiding currents teeming with predators. The storm's force made navigation nearly impossible, as wind, water, and debris threatened each rescue. Officials coordinated shelters on higher ground, moving people away from areas now dominated by sharks. Communication was limited, leaving teams to rely on visual signals and local knowledge under duress. Rescue boats bounced violently in waves, requiring precise movements to avoid capsizing in the flood. Medical teams treated minor injuries on rooftops, unable to transport patients safely through water. Children were prioritized, lifted above waves and predators, clinging to rescuers with desperation. Even helicopters struggled with visibility, avoiding power lines and debris while lifting stranded citizens. The coordination required trust, skill, and courage in one of the most dangerous storms in memory. Survivors watched as people risked everything to save others from the deadly, predator-filled waters. Shelters were overcrowded, yet offered the first sense of safety for families who had lost everything. Volunteers worked through exhaustion, facing relentless wind and rain to reach those still trapped. The sharks lurking in floodwaters made even shallow areas unsafe for rescue operations. Every minute mattered, as water levels rose and currents shifted, carrying both danger and debris. 8. The floating debris. The floodwaters carried not only sharks and animals but furniture, vehicles, and remnants of homes. Every object became a hazard, striking buildings, boats, and people with dangerous unpredictability. Sharks moved between debris, using it to navigate while villagers struggled to avoid collisions. Rooftops became crowded with floating items, forcing families to balance amidst chaos for survival. Cars, wooden crates, and household items collided in the water, forming a deadly floating maze. Trees and branches crashed into walls, their jagged forms adding to the storm's terror. Rescuers had to maneuver carefully, avoiding both predators and debris that could overturn their boats. Even small rafts carried people perilously close to sharp or heavy objects moving in the current. Every wave shifted debris violently, creating an ever-changing obstacle course of destruction. The floodwaters became a conveyor of chaos, with moving hazards amplifying the storm's danger. Villagers watched helplessly as familiar items transformed into deadly threats in the rising waters. Sharks occasionally struck floating debris, reminding everyone of the predator's strength and confusion. Shelters were filled with water-damaged items, adding misery to displaced families seeking refuge. The cyclone had transformed a familiar town into a surreal river of destruction and chaos. People held onto each other and makeshift objects, fearing both water and moving predators below. Even after water levels receded, debris blocked streets, reminding the village of the cyclone's might. 9. The heroic rescue. Among the chaos, stories of heroism emerged, rescuers braving sharks and floods to save lives. Fishermen used boats to navigate flooded streets, lifting families onto higher ground despite danger. Volunteers risked being swept away, guiding children and elderly through waters filled with predators. Some climbed into raging currents, securing ropes and nets to prevent people from being swept off. Communities coordinated, forming human chains to pull victims from rooftops to temporary safety. Even strangers joined, risking life and limb to help those trapped in the cyclone's inland path. Rescue dogs were deployed to help find survivors hidden beneath debris or trapped in currents. Every act of courage became a beacon of hope amidst destruction, fear, and despair. Children who were rescued clung to their heroes, trusting instinctively in human protection. The heroic actions inspired others, creating a wave of bravery that countered the storm's terror. Even medical staff worked in dangerous waters, stabilizing injured before evacuating them safely. 10. The aftermath begins as the cyclone finally moved on, waters began to recede, revealing destruction beyond imagination. Buildings were damaged, streets were blocked by debris, and the inland invasion of sharks was clear. Families emerged from shelters to assess what remained, finding homes destroyed and belongings lost. Villagers mourned animals carried away by water, sharks, and debris during the storm's fury. Electricity remained out, communication was limited, and help from outside had yet to fully arrive. Sharks trapped in shallow waters were relocated carefully by rescue teams to prevent further danger. Roads remained impassable, forcing villagers to clear debris manually to reach safe areas. Medical teams worked overtime, treating injuries sustained during floodwaters and predator attacks. Even as survival stabilized, emotional trauma was evident in faces and in the silent streets. Children were comforted, yet nightmares of sharks swimming through their town persisted strongly. The village realized recovery would take months, as infrastructure, livelihoods, and morale were shattered. Governments and aid organizations began planning long-term recovery after the immediate crisis. Villagers began sharing stories, creating a collective memory of both disaster and heroism. Rebuilding homes and roads became a daunting task, requiring resilience and coordinated effort. Floodwaters had left silt and debris across farmland, affecting crops and future food supply. 11. The shark relocation rescue teams worked tirelessly to capture sharks stranded in shallow pools left by receding floodwaters. Villagers watched anxiously, hoping that predators could be safely returned to the ocean far away. Fishermen guided the largest sharks into boats, carefully avoiding their powerful thrashing tails. Special nets and cages were used to transport the sharks without causing further injury to humans. Children observed in awe, learning how dangerous animals could also be treated with care and respect. Even the smallest sharks were relocated, as every predator posed a serious risk in the town. Volunteers coordinated movements, ensuring no one fell into the water or suffered from panic attacks. The process took hours, as currents and remaining debris complicated every rescue attempt. Teams worked under the sun and rain, exhausted but determined to restore balance to the village. Once the sharks were safely released into deeper waters, relief swept through the entire community. The villagers understood the storm's power had brought nature into their lives in terrifying ways. Even after relocation, fear lingered, but the act of saving predators created hope and pride. 12. Rebuilding lives. Villagers began assessing damage to homes, farms, and community infrastructure left by the cyclone. Families salvaged belongings from debris, prioritizing essentials and mementos of survival. Reconstruction efforts began with local materials and volunteer labor, despite fatigue and fear. Children helped clear streets, learning resilience through the experience of disaster and recovery. Every damaged house became a challenge, requiring skill, patience, and collective effort to repair. Markets reopened gradually, allowing food and necessities to return to normal life at a slow pace. Government teams arrived with supplies, providing temporary shelters, water, and medical aid. Villagers organized committees to plan rebuilding, ensuring safety against future storms. Community centers served as hubs for coordination, sharing information, and supporting affected families. Farmers replanted fields, hoping crops could grow again after floodwaters washed away fertile soil. Rebuilding required balancing urgent needs with long-term planning to withstand future disasters. Skilled workers repaired rooftops, walls, and fences, restoring physical protection to homes. Families relied on each other, strengthening bonds and cooperation formed during the cyclone. Children returned to schools when safe, learning amidst stories of survival and the storm's lessons. Electricity and communication lines were restored gradually, reconnecting the town with the outside world. Rebuilding lives became a collective effort, a testament to resilience and human determination. Psychological recovery was addressed through counseling and community support, easing trauma. 13. Water contamination crisis. Floodwaters left behind contamination, creating serious risks for disease and public health emergencies. Residents were warned not to drink or cook with water directly from flooded wells or rivers. Authorities distributed clean water and purification tablets to prevent the outbreak of infections. Stagnant water attracted mosquitoes and other disease-carrying insects, increasing health hazards. Medical teams vaccinated and treated vulnerable populations to reduce potential outbreaks. Public education campaigns informed villagers about hygiene and water safety practices urgently. Waterborne diseases became a critical concern as floodwaters receded but left pollutants behind. Families boiled water for daily use, learning the importance of caution after natural disasters. Sharks and other animals contributed biological hazards, making sanitation a top priority. Rescue workers cleaned debris from drainage systems to improve water flow and prevent further contamination. Flooded latrines posed additional risks, requiring careful disposal of waste and disinfecting affected areas. 14. Emotional trauma. Survivors faced emotional trauma, as memories of sharks and floodwaters lingered long after the storm. Children developed nightmares, fearing that predators could return at any moment into their homes. Adults experienced anxiety and sleeplessness, reliving the chaos of the cyclone in vivid detail. Counselors worked with families, providing psychological support to cope with post-traumatic stress. Community gatherings offered an outlet for sharing experiences and supporting one another emotionally. Stories of heroism and survival provided some comfort, helping people process the traumatic events. Villagers learned to talk openly about fears, reducing the stigma around emotional recovery. Even routine tasks felt daunting initially, as flood memories reminded everyone of nature's unpredictability. Children were encouraged to express emotions through art, writing, and group discussions with peers. Support networks formed naturally, as neighbors and relatives leaned on each other for reassurance. Local schools incorporated lessons on resilience, coping skills, and understanding natural disasters. Families celebrated small victories in recovery, rebuilding confidence alongside physical structures. Religious and spiritual leaders offered guidance, helping the community find hope and meaning. Trauma healing became as vital as rebuilding homes, ensuring mental well-being alongside survival. Counselors taught relaxation techniques and breathing exercises to manage anxiety and fear. Survivors shared experiences through storytelling, transforming fear into lessons for the future. 15. Unusual wildlife sightings. After the cyclone, villagers noticed unusual wildlife in areas far from their natural habitats. Birds that usually stayed near rivers appeared in farmlands, confused by the flooding. Small reptiles and amphibians were spotted in town streets, displaced from forests and wetlands. The inland invasion of sharks had ended, but the storm still left traces of sea life in odd places. Crabs and fish were found in low-lying areas, highlighting the cyclone's power to alter ecosystems. Farmers were cautious when walking through fields, as unusual creatures reminded them of the storm. Researchers visited to study the impact of the cyclone on local biodiversity and animal behavior. The unexpected presence of sea life became a teaching point for children and schools in town. Even pets reacted differently, wary of animals and creatures that had never appeared in the village. The ecosystem began to recover slowly, with displaced animals returning or being relocated carefully. Villagers documented sightings, creating records to monitor post-cyclone wildlife patterns. Some animals thrived in new environments temporarily, taking advantage of flooded areas. The unusual wildlife became both a curiosity and a reminder of the cyclone's extraordinary force. Scientists noted long-term ecological changes caused by the storm and inland water intrusion. Community awareness grew about the interconnectedness of nature and the unpredictability of storms. 16. The economic impact. The cyclone caused massive financial losses, destroying homes, crops, and fishing equipment. Families who depended on farming faced months of uncertainty as fields were washed away completely. Markets were flooded, preventing trade and reducing access to essential food and supplies immediately. Fishing communities lost boats, nets, and storage facilities, halting livelihoods for weeks or months. Small businesses struggled to reopen, facing both structural damage and reduced customer demand. Insurance claims overwhelmed companies, delaying compensation and adding frustration to survivors. Construction materials were scarce, slowing rebuilding efforts and increasing the cost of repairs. Tourism halted, as the town's beaches and streets were unsafe, impacting hospitality income drastically. Local governments allocated emergency funds, but the scale of damage required more extensive support. Employment was disrupted, forcing families to rely on relief aid instead of regular income temporarily. Farmers faced soil erosion, salinity, and debris, reducing productivity for the next growing season. Entrepreneurs collaborated to provide temporary goods and services, showing resilience amidst crisis. Transport routes were blocked, hindering supply chains and delaying reconstruction and economic revival. 17. Education disruption. Schools were submerged, forcing students to miss weeks of lessons while classrooms were repaired. Teachers worked tirelessly to provide alternative learning methods and maintain student engagement. Temporary shelters doubled as classrooms, providing some continuity amidst chaos and fear. Children faced emotional stress, balancing trauma from the storm with the challenge of returning to learning. Books, supplies, and school equipment were damaged, requiring donations and community support to replace. Curriculum adjustments were necessary, prioritizing safety and emotional recovery over academic pressure. Local education authorities coordinated with volunteers to ensure children did not fall behind in studies. Community centers hosted tutoring sessions, helping students catch up while rebuilding homes and lives. The experience became a lesson in resilience, patience, and the importance of adaptive learning methods. Teachers incorporated disaster preparedness into lessons, educating children about safety during storms. Students shared experiences through writing and art, expressing trauma while learning coping skills. Even after schools reopened, occasional closures occurred due to lingering hazards from floodwaters. Psychological support was integrated into education to help children overcome fear and anxiety. Parents actively participated, ensuring homework and safety measures were balanced during recovery. Technology was used where possible to maintain communication between students and teachers remotely. Community involvement proved crucial in keeping education alive despite widespread infrastructure damage. Lessons emphasized both academic and life skills, teaching children how to respond to disasters effectively. Children learned teamwork and problem solving, developing resilience that extended beyond the classroom. The disruption highlighted vulnerabilities in the education system, prompting long-term safety improvements. By the end of the recovery period, schools became symbols of hope, knowledge, and resilience for the town. 18. Environmental recovery. Floodwaters receded, but the environment faced challenges including soil erosion and pollution. Trees uprooted by the cyclone blocked rivers and streams, affecting natural water flow and fish habitats. Villagers planted new trees to stabilize the soil and prevent landslides in vulnerable areas. Debris removal became critical to restore wetlands, fields, and rivers to their natural states. Marine life displaced inland gradually returned to oceans, guided by careful relocation efforts. Community cleanup campaigns ensured that waste and pollutants did not harm remaining wildlife. Erosion control measures were introduced, combining natural barriers and human engineering techniques. Awareness programs educated citizens on preventing further damage to rivers, coastlines, and forests. Reintroduction of plants helped restore local ecosystems, supporting biodiversity and preventing desertification. Environmental scientists monitored recovery, documenting the impact of the cyclone on flora and fauna. Shorelines were reinforced, and floodplains were surveyed to improve future preparedness strategies. Villagers learned to respect the delicate balance between human activity and natural ecosystems. Wildlife corridors were maintained to allow safe passage for animals returning to their habitats. Education campaigns emphasized the importance of protecting nature to prevent future disasters. Every tree planted, river cleared, and wetland restored became a small victory against environmental loss. 19. Strengthened community bonds. The disaster strengthened community bonds, as neighbors relied on each other for survival and recovery. Shared experience created trust, cooperation, and mutual understanding among previously distant families. Volunteer groups formed, distributing food, water, and supplies while organizing rescue and cleanup efforts. Families took in displaced neighbors, creating temporary shelters and providing support without hesitation. Community meetings allowed everyone to share experiences, concerns, and recovery strategies collaboratively. Cultural traditions and rituals were observed, providing emotional strength and a sense of normalcy. Religious gatherings offered hope and collective prayer for protection and future safety from disasters. Youth groups engaged in helping elders and children, reinforcing responsibility and solidarity in the town. Local businesses collaborated to supply resources efficiently, showing community-driven recovery in action. Shared meals, celebrations of small victories, and storytelling reinforced connections after trauma. Collective rebuilding created lasting bonds between residents who faced unprecedented challenges together. Neighbors helped repair each other's homes, sharing skills, labor, and encouragement freely. Support networks remained active even after immediate recovery, ensuring preparedness for future storms. Communities organized training sessions for disaster response, strengthening future resilience together. Friendships were solidified under extreme conditions, creating a strong sense of identity and unity. Collaboration between residents and authorities improved planning for future emergencies and disasters. 20. Lessons learned. The cyclone taught villagers invaluable lessons about preparedness, resilience, and respect for nature. Emergency plans were created, including evacuation routes, shelters, and communication strategies. Families prepared kits with essentials such as food, water, medicines, and important documents. Training sessions emphasized first aid, swimming, and survival skills for children and adults alike. Authorities improved early warning systems, ensuring timely alerts for future storms and floods. villagers learned the importance of avoiding flood-prone areas and securing homes against strong winds. Community drills simulated storm scenarios, helping residents respond calmly under pressure. Sustainable rebuilding practices were adopted, with stronger structures and safer layouts for homes. Children were educated on environmental stewardship and disaster awareness from a young age. Lessons included understanding wildlife behavior, especially the risks posed by unexpected predators. Communities recognized that prevention, preparation, and cooperation reduce disaster impact dramatically. Families documented experiences to educate future generations about survival and resilience strategies. Local government invested in flood barriers, drainage systems, and coastal protection to mitigate damage. Public health campaigns focused on sanitation, water purification, and disease prevention post-disaster. The experience taught humility, reminding villagers of nature's uncontrollable and powerful forces. As the cyclone finally subsided, residents emerged to assess the damage, finding streets littered with debris and traces of the shark's passage. Rescue teams worked tirelessly to help both people and marine animals return to safer areas, facing dangers that most could never imagine. The event highlighted the immense power of nature and how quickly ordinary life can be turned upside down. Communities realized the importance of preparedness, evacuation plans, and understanding the unpredictable forces of weather and wildlife. Like and subscribe for more gripping stories where humans witness nature's most astonishing and terrifying moments firsthand. Comment below with your thoughts on how communities can better protect themselves from extreme events like this. Scientists continue to study the cyclone's impact to prevent similar disasters and to understand the behavior of displaced marine animals. The memory of sharks swimming through streets serves as a vivid reminder of the ocean's might and humanity's vulnerability. Events like this inspire both fear and respect for the natural world, showing that life can change in an instant. Thank you for watching and following this incredible story of survival, power, and nature's unexpected reach.